Hi, in this video I want to show you how to do time stretching on the Elektron Rytm. What I will show today will work both on the Mark I and the Mark II. The general need of time stretching is when we have tempo synced samples. So for example here we have this perfect loop that is synchronized to the speed of our pattern, but if I now were to change the overall tempo, so now we have the problem that this doesn't loop correctly anymore. With time stretching, we can make the sample always play in time with our pattern. The general idea is to have lots of virtual triggers here that all change the start position of the sample. The way we can do that is by using Retrigger and to set it to a relatively high rate. Let's say 32. Every 32th step, now we will have a trigger. And we want to have this play over all the 16 steps. So this will sound like this now. So now we have lots of triggers. What we need to do now is to change the start position for each of these triggers that occurs. So one technique is to use the LFOs to animate the sample start parameter. But as I mentioned earlier, I do not want to use up the LFO because it's very useful for other duties. Okay, so I want to show you one little trick here. And so we have the velocity parameter here. We can set this all the way up. And if we now go into the Retrigger menu, we can see we have this velocity parameter. And so this is a velocity ramp. So if I set this now to minus 128, then it will start at the velocity of the trigger. So this is what we have set to 127 here. And so then it will go all the way down to 0. Let's listen to it now. So we can hear that we have still lots of retriggering, but the velocity turns down. If we now go into the sound menu, into the sound settings, then we can see we have this parameter here where we can tell the rhythm not to map velocity to the volume of the playback. So now it will sound like this. Now it sounds as before. But if we now look into the velocity mod menu, we can see we have this parameter here. So this is the velocity that ramps down. And so in this modulation setup here, we can set up different targets for this velocity modulation. There's one little problem, and so that is that the velocity cannot be 0, but only like the lowest value it goes to is 1. So if we want to set this to the sample start parameter, we need a value of 0 for the start of the sample. The way we can achieve that is by using a negative modulation, and so 128 velocity, meaning that we are at the start of the sample. Let's first set this target here to the sample start. And then we set this to minus 120, like this. And so then we go to the sample page and set the start parameter to 119. So if we now play this back, then we should hopefully hear a time stretched beat. We can change the tempo. And it's still playing in time. We have not used up the LFO, so we can, for example, do stupid things with it. And now we still have a nice time stretch beat, even though we are, for example, modulating the pitch of it. This technique is not only useful for beats, but for all kinds of atmospheric samples as well. And so one cool trick that I also want to show is in the velocity menu we have multiple targets, so we can modulate up to 4 parameters. We can also modulate the sample end time and also set this to minus 120. So now we have very tiny bits of the sample that are played back. But now we can turn on the loop, so we will always have these tiny slices that are then looped. I'll disable the LFO again. we use a higher value of retrigger rate, then this can, for some samples, also sound very nice. So it's more of a robotic feel now. This is how you can use the velocity to do something more useful than just turning up and down the volume of your samples, and for example implement time stretching with it. Thanks for watching and hope to see you in the next one.